Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 29 transfer plans. I'm actually not on a free hit this week, which is very few of us over here on YouTube, but it should be useful if you are on your free hit because we'll still talk about the key players to own, but especially if you're not on your free hit, I'd imagine there won't be a lot of non-free hit content on YouTube this week, so this should be incredibly useful specifically for you. If you do enjoy today's video and you get any use out of it, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, what a strange game week 28 has been. It's been very, very low scoring, but there are still two fixtures yet to play, so you never know what's going to happen in those two. And those are Chelsea versus Newcastle, of which I have Cole Palmer, and then the second fixture of the double game week, which is Bournemouth versus Luton. Obviously, if there are lots of goals in that, then maybe the average points go up, but it is very, very low. It is, in fact, so low that I am on 38 with a -12 taking me down to 26, and I'm actually almost on a green arrow. I think only a couple of points off getting a green arrow. And there were a few things that I wanted to talk about with my team. Very briefly, no one got me any points other than obviously Son's 17-pointer, which was absolutely massive if you owned him, because that is the same as some people's total points. So Son massively pulled through there with the goal and 2 assists. And then Pedro Porro is an absolute superstar, not only being miraculously fit when we thought he might not even be in team training, but then getting me a clean sheet and a bonus point. That was massive this week, because most people either benched or sold Pedro Porro. So he was a real differential for me. So in a week where I took a big hit and people were berating my team in general, it's not done too badly. And even if my 4 double game week players just get appearance points and Cole Palmer only gets a 2-pointer, I could still be close to a green arrow. So we are probably looking at a small red or a small green, or maybe even better depending on what happens in those remaining 2 games. And I did just want to speak about firstly, the -12 to explain why I did it and what the -12 was in case you missed it, but also just my approach to FPL at the moment and how I want other people to try and approach the game if possible. So on the -12, the 4 players that I brought in were Neto, Doughty, Bowen, and Morris. If you look at those, they got 3-2-2-2. So the 4 that I brought in thus far have all blanked. Obviously, Bowen doesn't have a second fixture, so he can't get me any further points. But Neto, Doughty, and Morris obviously have a second fixture. I'm hopeful that one of the 3 at least pick me up some points in there. But even if they don't, I'm considering this largely a very successful -12 hit. Because the players that I took out were Kelleher, but obviously I would have played Areola. So Areola got me 2, Neto has got me 3, with 1 extra fixture this week and a better fixture in Game Week 30. So Neto, a success. Even if he only gets one or 2 points, I'm considering that a success because Areola's blanked. He's probably going to get at least 2 or 3 more points than Areola. Plus, like I said, a better fixture in 30 for me. So the Neto transfer, I'm really happy with. Doughty came in for Ake. Ake blanked, or got 2 points. Doughty has an extra fixture now with some attacking threat, plus an extra fixture in Game Week 29. So just through appearance points, Doughty makes back the hit. The only one that didn't go brilliantly this week, which was Richarlison to Bowen, but obviously I would have played Foden instead. So Foden and Bowen both got 2 points. The thing that I'm consoling myself with here is I would have taken a hit for Bowen in 29 anyway. So given the fact that Foden blanked, again, I'm not considering that a massive loss because I would have just made the hit for Bowen in 29 anyway. And then the final one is Cole to Morris. Obviously, Haaland blanked. Morris got 2 points, but Morris has an extra fixture in 28 and an extra fixture in 29. So even if, again, he just gets appearance points in those 2 games, it makes back the hit. So largely, and I didn't expect to sit here and say this, I'm considering the -12 a success already, really, because just through appearance points alone is pretty much going to make itself back because the 4 players that I sold all blanked. And the players that I would have played instead, such as Areola and Foden, also blanked. So you could call me a little bit lucky there, but I think it's pretty much paid off, especially when you consider now how strong my team looks for Game Week 29, and I've not had to use a free hit or a wildcard. So I now go into the back end of the season with wildcard 31, free hit 34, and bench boost 37. So on the -12 itself, I'm pretty happy with it. I know a lot of people didn't understand it, but it was just for the sheer volume of fixtures. Luton players getting me 2 extra fixtures per player. Neto getting me an extra fixture this week and a better fixture in 30. Bowen getting me an extra fixture next week and then Burnley at home this week. It just made sense to me on paper. I wasn't doing it for views. I wasn't doing it just to be random. It genuinely just, for me, I could see the logic in it. Now, I got a lot of hate on social media. Some of the stuff you'll see publicly, some of the stuff you won't see what is sent to me personally. And I'm not trying to get you to empathize and feel sorry for me. Absolutely not. I love my job. But I do struggle with a few things at the moment around some of the way that some people are approaching the game and approaching people making different decisions. And maybe I'll put my tweet on screen because I did have a bit of a passionate rant over on Twitter, if you follow me over on there, about my issues at the moment. And it's mainly around people thinking there is a right and wrong in FPL. Firstly, no one has a bloody clue. Who knows what's going to happen? We're trying to predict the future, but not only predict the future, predict what loads of random players will do on a pitch across 10 different fixtures every week. No one's got a clue what's going to happen. So anyone that looks at a team and says, I know what's going to happen, or this is right, this is wrong, they're wrong. Because you just can't say whether something's right and wrong in FPL. So that's my first issue. There's people that just seem to think they know what's going to happen and they know that you've made a bad decision ahead of time. But also that, like, there's always, you have to follow the optimal thing every single time. And I realize I'm partly to blame for this, by the way. I talk about AI models all the time, and I actually really enjoy using them. I enjoy looking at points projections. I enjoy looking at data and saying, this player has better data, therefore I think they're better. But I also think there should be some level of creativity and individuality and the ability to do something which on paper you're like, oh, that doesn't look great, but have fun with it. And I understand the argument. The best way to have fun in FPL is to get the most points, right? I am not enjoying FPL when I'm getting red arrows and ranked at 3 million as I was earlier in the season. I'm not saying have fun at the expense of getting good scores every week, but sometimes you can have fun and do something a bit different whilst also thinking it could go well for you. And I'll use my -12 as an example. I genuinely thought this was a good -12. I didn't do this for clicks. I didn't do it for views. I didn't do it because I was bored. I did it because I could see on paper it logically working out. But I also knew it wasn't an obvious strategy. The obvious strategy was free hit 29 or wildcard. But I kind of backed it as, listen, it might not be optimal on paper. Yes, I'm taking a big hit. But it makes sense to me and it also feels a bit fun. I think over the last year or two, and especially this season, people have lost the ability to do what they want to do because they feel like on paper, if something else is more obvious or makes more sense, they need to follow that. Like, let's say you're picking between player A and player B. You might prefer watching player A. You might think they're a more talented footballer. You might just genuinely be excited owning them. But player B's got 0.1 better XG and therefore everyone's telling you have to pick them. And again, I understand my role in that, but I want to encourage creativity. I want to encourage brave decision making because that is what the game is about. The game isn't about always following what the optimal decision is to eke the most expected value that you possibly can from your decision. So it's just frustrating to me sometimes, a little bit anyway, and I'm sure you feel the same as well. And I'm sure that is the reason that content creators get a lot of hate, because you feel like we are to blame for that. And fair enough if you think that is the main reason, but you don't have to do the same as everyone else. Every single decision doesn't have to be optimal. Every single decision doesn't have to be the perfect safe decision on paper. If you fancy a -8, go out there and take a bloody -8. If you fancy selling Son for a big differential next week, like Kulusevski, go and do that. If you think that's a good decision for you, but also increases your enjoyment. And again, I'm fully aware that for most people, the way they can enjoy the game is to get the most points and to get the best rank. But you can do that whilst also having a bit of fun with it as well. And I myself have felt very rigid at points this year because every week there feels like an obvious transfer. Everyone's talking about the same player. Everyone's saying this is the obvious player in transfer. And you feel almost stupid if you're back against that. You feel like you're going to get mocked and berated, especially if you're active over on social media. And something which I said when I wrote my book, this isn't a plug for my book, by the way, I'm not going to discuss it any further, but something that I said when I wrote my book, if you finish top 100 in the world, but your season has been filled with anxiety every weekend because you're scared about players you don't own and worrying every time the SofaScore app goes off and you see who scored a goal, and every single waking hour is worrying about getting a red arrow, versus you finish 4 million, but you have had a brilliant time in your mini league with your friends. You love watching the football at the weekend. Do you know who the real winner is there? It genuinely is the person that finishes 4 million. Because what are you getting from this? Even if you win, you don't win anything good, right? What is the value unless it's enjoyment? And I think that is lost on so many people now. And I keep saying everyone. You might be watching this and thinking, I have fun with it every week and I always make different decisions, which is good. I really, really appreciate if that is you. But for a lot of people, maybe you can back it and let me know down below if you agree. But it gets to a point where You just make decisions because it feels like it's optimal on paper. You're then anxious about players that you don't own. And I feel like a lot of us are losing the enjoyment within the game because we are scared of being creative, being individual, making decisions because we want to. Make decisions because they are decisions you want to make, not because you see others making them or because you feel like you have to make the optimal decision. The real winners in FPL are the ones that get the most enjoyment from the game. It does not matter where you finish if you haven't enjoyed the process of going through that season. Even as content creators, this is my job. One of a couple of jobs, but this is my job, right? I still would rather enjoy the season and get a slightly lower rank than not enjoy the season and finish top 10k, right? It needs to be sustainable if you want this as a hobby and something you want to do for a while. You need to enjoy it. Find the fun in it. And maybe I'm just talking on behalf of you and this isn't the way you feel, but speaking to a lot of people, I think it is. So I'm going to implore you from now on, and I want you to hold me to the same standards, to make decisions that you want to make and to have fun with the game. And that doesn't mean, by the way, like this week, you will see my transfers in a second, they're the obvious transfers. They are the probably optimal transfers on paper, but that doesn't mean that I'm not having fun. I just think in the future, this week I took a -12. This is the most I've enjoyed FPL in such a long time. And I said this last time I did something rogue. I can't remember what it was, but every time I do something a bit rogue, even when it doesn't go well, by the way, oh, it was when I sold Haaland before. I loved it. It was something different. I was excited looking at my team. So there we go. Passionate rant over. I just want you guys to enjoy the game. And I think the best way to do that is not to make bad decisions, but to make decisions that you want to make. Sometimes they will be the obvious ones on paper, but sometimes they won't. And that is absolutely okay. And I think the more people that do that, the less berating that we'll get for making a decision that isn't optimal on paper. So there we go. Rant over. Let me know what you think down below. Let's now move on to Game Week 29. Right, sorry about that random rant at the start of the video, but now let's look at Game Week 29, and I think I'm in a very good position, and let's pretend that it's not because I just took a -12, but actually I've just planned very, very well. But in all honesty, I spoke about that hit enough now. I'm not going to keep talking about it. It has set me up not only, I think, okay for last week, but also pretty well for Game Week 29 as well. And I look at my team, and I currently have 9 players for Game Week 29, and therefore for a -4 hit, I can get to 11. A couple of things I'd like to say. Firstly, I think my team is very well set up now. I've got lucky that a couple of injured players have come back in Porro and Pau, and some of my other players are starting to perform quite well as well. I know that Charlie Taylor doesn't count as a player, some people are saying. I think that's nonsense because you just never know what a player can do in a single week. And I also think that Brentford haven't been brilliant, and actually Burnley have improved recently. And Charlie Taylor does whip in the odd cross. So I don't think you rule him out as a player, but I am aware that whilst I have 9, it's not the same 9 that some people would have on free hit, right? Areola is not a perfect player to own this week against Villa, especially because a lot of us will have either 1 or 2 Aston Villa attackers. Pau Torres probably isn't the best defender to own, as is Charlie Taylor. But the other players, Porro, Doughty, Son, Bowen, Watkins, Morris, those 6 players I have seen on every single free hit pretty much. I didn't expect to see so many Morrises, by the way, but I am yet to see a free hit draft without Morris. Whether you think he'll be in your free hit or not, completely up to you, but it actually appears that those 6 will be on every free hit. The 2 players that I bring in, as you'll see in a second, will probably be on everyone's free hit as well. Now, the reason I'm using the free hit as the benchmark is you can pick the perfect 11 on a free hit. That's the whole point of it, right? So if I can get 8 of my players, which is on everyone else's free hit, plus I've still got 3 other players, if one of my other 3 players does well, I could outscore some free hits potentially, if it all goes to plan. I'm not saying it will, but as long as I can get relatively close, what I've managed to do across these weeks then is save the wildcard and the free hit, and I'm going to be in the strongest possible position going into the back end of the season to have the wildcard, free hit, and bench boost. So it's going to be relatively easy for me this week. If a player has a fixture and they're fit, then they stay. I am aware that I have 9 now, and I've got to get through the next week without any injuries. If I do pick up any injuries, I'll have the decision to make around whether I make it a -8 or just field 9 or 10, however many I have depending upon injuries. But as things stand right now, everyone that I have that has a fixture is currently fit as far as I'm aware. Captaincy will be between Son and then maybe a player that I'm bringing in up front who you can probably see based on the thumbnail. Maybe an Ollie Watkins I could be tempted by, but I just think Sonny's on penalties, a midfielder, great goal threat, and Spurs are scoring goals at the moment, and Maddison's starting to look better as well, and I think that makes Son an even better asset. Porro is back. He's another player. By the way, if you watched the Spurs game, Porro almost fed Son 3 or 4 times, so that combination could be very, very good. I think this team's looking good, and yes, I'm aware I just took a -12 to get here, and I'm going to have to take a -4 to get to 11, but I'm quite happy doing so. So the team is looking pretty strong. As you can see, I've got Neto on the bench, which I'm fine with because he's got a good fixture in 30. I've got Palmer on the bench, which I'm fine with because he has a brilliant fixture against Burnley in Game Week 30. And then Saka and Gabriel, I've got lots of money tied up. I'm going to want them in 31. Despite the fact they've got City in 30, I'm going to hold on to Saka and Gabriel as well. So that bench will be my bench this week. I've then got the starting 11, as is. Obviously, 9 of them have fixtures, which means Foden and Solanke, I think, are going to be the 2 that are sold this week, which will put me in a 4-3-3. Foden, I actually still have 0.3 million tied up in. So if I sell Foden now and want to buy him back on my 31 wildcard, I'm going to lose 0.3 million. But when I look at a lot of the options, pretty much every good option that I would want in Game Week 29 has a good fixture in 30 as well. Nottingham Forest midfielders, Aston Villa midfielders, Spurs midfielders. They all have 2 good fixtures. So when Foden's got Blank and Arsenal, yes, I'm going to lose some money, but I think there is a lot of points to be gained over the next 2 by going for a midfielder, even for a hit. So I'm pretty happy selling Foden, despite the fact that I do have money tied up in him. And on Solanke, I don't have much money tied up. And whilst he does have a good fixture in 30 and good fixtures beyond, I can always wildcard him back in around Game Week 31. Or maybe look to bring him in a little bit later, depending on when their double is. So I am pretty happy this week selling Foden and Solanke, despite the fact that it will lose me some money. So that's the team. I don't need to talk about it much more. Only the 1 free transfer, but 10.5 million in the bank. So let's take a look at the midfielders and forwards that I'm currently considering, and then take a look at what my 11 will look like after that -4 hit. So guys, let's take a look at my Game Week 29 watch list. But remember that I am looking to wildcard in 31. And very briefly on this, because I've had quite a few questions, why 31, not 30? Some people are looking to go in 30. Firstly, the value in wildcarding in 30 is you can immediately remove all of the players that you've got in 29 that you don't want. Let's say you've got triple Luton. No worries. You're wildcarding in 30. You can remove all of those bad options. And you can immediately bring in the likes of Palmer, Gusto, Salah, Darwin, who have good fixtures from 30. Also, Game Week 30 is just after the international break. So if you have any issues in the international break with injuries, players not coming back on time, then you can just get rid of them and you can sort that out. So wildcard 30, I do think is very, very powerful. The reason I'm looking at 31 at the moment is a lot of the players that you also own in 29 do have good fixtures in 30, and some of them you might not look to carry long term. A couple of examples for me. I'm not going to have more than 1 or 2 Spurs assets on my wildcard, but they've got Luton in 30. I'm not going to have more than 1 Aston Villa, and in fact, I don't think I'll have any Aston Villa on my 31 wildcard, and they've got Wolves at home in 30. And so I also already have the likes of Palmer, who's got Burnley. I've got Neto, who's got a good fixture too. I actually look at my team in 30 that I had in 29, and it's pretty strong. The other reason is Man City and Arsenal play against each other in 30, and I only currently have 2 players in that fixture, whereas on a wildcard, I'm almost certain I'd want 3 City, 3 Arsenal, in which case I would have to play at least 3 of them. Probably 4 of them. So I just don't think wildcard 30 suits my team as well. But let's see what happens. At the moment, leaning towards wildcard 31. Let me know down below, by the way, what is your chip strategy as things stand? So this is my watch list at the moment for Game Week 29. Bearing in mind the plan is to wildcard 30. So I'm looking at Game Week 29 and then Game Week 30. And with that in mind, I'm looking really at 3 teams that I think have good fixtures across the next 2, both from an attacking and defensive perspective. I quite like the fixtures for Aston Villa over the next 2. I think they're very strong. I think Nottingham Forest as well, Luton and Palace, 2 really, really nice fixtures. And then Spurs, I think, are really the team to target. I've already got 2 in Porro and Son. I just need to add a 3rd. But Spurs have Luton in 30, and obviously they've got Fulham this week. So I think those are 3 teams that I'm really looking at as having pretty good fixtures and probably going to make up the bulk of the players that I'm looking to bring in. But on top of that, whilst Brentford play against Manchester United in 30, which I don't think is the best fixture, they've got such a strong fixture this week against Burnley. And even though Burnley have looked pretty good over the last 2, it's still a strong fixture that I would also be tempted to target Brentford players too. So those are the sort of teams that are going on at the moment in my mind. In defence, I just can't see myself making a defender transfer because I've already got 4 defenders. And I've actually only got 4 attackers as things stand. So I've got so many spare slots in my attack that I can bring players in. As I already said, I want to take out Foden and Solanke for a midfielder and a forward. That's already a -4 hit. I could even bring in another attacker then and then play a 3 at the back. So even if I do get 1 defender getting injured, or maybe even 2, I just don't think I'll bother replacing them considering I'm wildcarding soon. And I think I'll still focus my transfers on the attackers. So I don't think there's a situation I can think of at the moment anyway, in which I'd make a defender transfer. But if I do, I could bring in a Spurs defender, Udogie or Romero, but I'd rather attack the attackers and bring in someone like, as we'll discuss in a second, a James Maddison if I get a 3rd Spurs asset. So I don't think I'll go for a defender, but I do see the value in them given the fixtures over the next two. You could bring in a Brentford defender. So Reguilon, if he's fit, could be a decent option. Rorslev as well on the other side could be decent. I know Collins is really good for minutes, okay for bonus points, some attacking threat. So Collins could be decent. But Brentford haven't been defending that well, and Burnley are playing quite well as well. So I'm not desperate to get a Brentford defender in. And I've put Robinson here, some attacking threat. Not a great fixture against Spurs, but I do like the fixture in 30 against Sheffield United. But none of these are inspiring me. This is when I look at the free hit for 29, outside of Doughty and Porro, who I already own, I don't see that many standout options, really. Maybe you could go for Moreno if you wanted to, but I've already got Pau Torres to cover the Aston Villa clean sheet. So I'm not blown away by defenders, and therefore I can't see myself making a defender transfer this week. So it really is the midfielders and the forwards. In midfield, it's the two Aston Villa midfielders I've got there, so Douglas Luiz and Leon Bailey. I've got Elanga and Gibbs White on there, and then I've got James Maddison. I do still like the Villa midfielders. I think I still would go for Leon Bailey, despite the fact that Douglas Luiz is still playing a little bit further forward. Whether, obviously, the sending off to McGinn impacts how far forward he plays, maybe it will. So maybe Luiz really isn't an option now, but his data recently has been much stronger. He is still on penalties, and he is a bonus points monster. And in a given week, if he gets a pen and an assist, he can come away with like 14, 15 points. So I do really like Douglas Luiz, and I am still considering him. But I think I would go for Bailey, especially because I only need to own this player for 2 weeks. My concern is that Aston Villa have the second leg against Ajax before game week 29. If that goes 120 minutes and Bailey plays close to 120 minutes, could you see Diaby playing the West Ham game? Maybe. So I do have some concerns around Bailey's minutes and whether he's going to get enough across 29 and 30 to make it worthwhile. Speaking of minutes, Elanga was actually benched in game week 28, which I'm shocked about, given he's been their best attacker recently. If you are a Nottingham Forest fan or you know the reason for the benching, I think it was just tactical and or a rest, which does worry me slightly as to whether he's done something wrong or maybe it was just a single matchup thing that they just didn't fancy playing Elanga. But does that put me off bringing him in? For the next two fixtures, remember, because this isn't a free hit for me, I would need them in 30 as well, given the other players that I own. It probably does. So I would probably go for the penalty taker in Gibbs White. His data's been pretty rubbish, but a bit of a vibes pick again. I like him as a player. I think he's very, very good. And he is on pens. And his minutes are very good. So I think Gibbs White would probably be the Forest midfielder of choice at the moment. But realistically, with Fulham away and then Luton in game week 30, Maddison does feel like the obvious transfer for me. And this is one of those that I was speaking about. This is the optimal transfer. It's the obvious transfer, but it's also a transfer I'm quite excited by. I like owning James Maddison. I like the idea of getting a third Spurs asset. Again, I'm almost certain that almost everyone on a free hit will go Porro, Maddison, Son. To get Maddison in, it gives me that Spurs triple up that everyone else has to free hit in. But the great thing for me is I don't lose them against Luton. Right? If you free hit the three of them in, you won't have them for next week. So I like the fact that I've then also got the triple Spurs for the great fixture in 30. So whilst it is an obvious move on paper, it feels pretty good to me to do Foden to Maddison. So that's the current plan transfer in midfield. And then in the forward, there's just no one. Awoniyi could be in there, but again, minutes are a bit of a concern at the moment for him. Maybe it's just coming back from injury and his fitness isn't quite there, but a bit of a concern as to how many minutes he's available to play. And I've got Ivan Toney on penalties, good data sat there against Burnley. It feels, again, like an obvious transfer, but one that I like. I haven't owned Toney this season, and I like him as a player. He has, and I think now blanked 4 games in a row, if I'm correct. So he's certainly not on a hot run, but that doesn't bother me. He's incredibly good. His data has always been strong. And like I say, penalties 90 minutes. There's not a lot that I dislike about Toney. And on top of that, yes, he plays United in 30, but it's at home. And Toney loves scoring in those types of fixtures. So I could definitely see him doing quite well against Manchester United. So, boring, I know. But when I look at this, I like the idea of having Maddison and Toney this week for a -4. Let me know if you disagree with those transfers at all. So, let's now take a look at the team if I were to make those two transfers. So guys, with that -4 penciled in, I haven't yet made the transfers, of course. I'll make them very, very last minute. Here is the way that the team would look. -4 hit, 9.4 million in the bank after those two transfers. I would, as things stand, have 11. And again, I know Pau, Areola, Taylor, etc. aren't perfect. But I've now watched 3 different videos. I'm not calling content creators out because free hit 29 is probably a better strategy on paper than what I'm doing. But I've now watched 3 videos before even recording this. And all 3 of them had Son, Bowen, Maddison, Watkins, Morris, Toney. My 6 attackers they have Plus, they then, of course, have a 7th attacker, and they wouldn't have Charlie Taylor, and they probably wouldn't have Powell and Areola. But Porro, Doughty, Son, Bowen, Maddison, Watkins, Morris, Tony, those 8 seem to be in most people's free hits. So I'm not far off. Yes, I've had to take 12 points of hits over the last 2 weeks, but I'm okay with that because I've got to save the free hit for a potential decent double game week 34. So that would be the way the team looks. If obviously I get any injuries throughout the week, let's say, I don't know, someone like Powell or Porro re-aggravate their injury, I have the decision to make. Do I field 10? Because I think I'd still do Maddison and Tony. Do I field 10 or do I take a -8 to field 11? If it's for a defender, I think I am more likely to just say, I'll just rock with a 3-3-3 formation. If one of my major attackers picks up an injury, there will be some temptation, I'm sure, especially if it looks like it's a long-term injury, to bring in another attacker. But I'd be pretty happy with this team, whether it's 10 or 11 players. I'm actually quite excited for Game Week 29, despite not having the free hit. I'd love to know down below what you think of the team, what you think about my transfers over the last couple of weeks, the new strategy, and let me know what you're currently planning for Game Week 29 as well. So guys, there we have it. That is my transfer plans video for Blank Game Week 29. Hopefully you did enjoy, and if you did, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well for more content throughout the week. And there will be a free hit draft at some point this week as well, where I'll give you my opinion on the best players to own for Game Week 29. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.